You'll remember that in the writing and presenting learning area, we talked about a formal report written and an informal written report. Now, sometimes you'll be asked to give a spoken report, and you're going to be told that the length must be 3 to 5 minutes. So, what I suggest you do, you're going to, whether you have something to work from is fine. If you already have a written report, I'm going to refer to those two, but otherwise, you're going to have to write it first. Now, what you do then is that you adapt your written report that you've already prepared for, say, the principal of the school. And you're going to adapt it so that you perhaps deliver this report at an assembly. You'll be asked by the principal to deliver it orally at assembly, for instance. You can follow the structure of the written investigative report, and that's the one, it's 13.18 in writing and presenting, or the informal one, which is point 19. So you can take either of those and then convert it into a speech format to be delivered orally. But of course, the separate headings that are so special to a written report, the special underlined headings that can stand out, and the principal, when he or she reads it, it jumps out at the person. That will be obviously be left out. You're not going to have those headings, and also the names and the dates will be incorporated into the report. You're not going to say, here I signed the report, the date was such and such. You're going to incorporate all of that, right? So it will then therefore resemble a speech in format. You can't have it in the same format as the written report, but you can use all the information. And very often you will add more information, because remember, your written report was in 180 words. It's very short. For your oral report to last 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to have to more or less double perhaps the number of words. So the formal written report, I'm just reminding you of this one, was 13.18. This is what it looked like. It was formal. The style was simple, straightforward, logical structure. And this, of course, is typical to title this headings. I said none of that in the spoken. The informal report, we said, was a short report on something that happened or an event that took place, and where the writer was involved. That's the informal one. Let's say something happened on the school grounds. Perhaps you went on a training camp. Perhaps there was a theft in the school. Perhaps there was a tour that you went on, netball tour and or whatever tour, art tour. And the register, of course, was informal. There was first person involvement. The tone was also different. It was informal. The style was very simple, straightforward, clear, concise. You can bring in a bit of humor in the informal report. Remember, we said, because you were there, you were on the tour, and a funny thing happened on the bus or at the venue that you visited. The structure is still logical, and remember, we said with the informal report, you choose your own headings, but you still have the headings, right? And subheadings. But all of those headings and subheadings will go, right? Now, I'm giving you the example that we had. Remember, we said, for attention, the principal. You're obviously not going to say that in your speech. Do you understand? You're not going to say when it's going to be shared. Can you see what I'm saying? You're going to introduce yourself. So you're going to bring your name, which you normally sign at the end, right at the beginning. My name is such and such, and this is what you're going to speak about. You're going to speak about a trip to the cradle of mankind. So you're going to introduce yourself and state the purpose. Your name is Mandy Long, and can you see? But some of those things you're going to leave out. You are obviously not using the headings, and you may or you may not say that the principal asked you to put this together, but you can actually leave that out. You may want to use the date when you went on the trip to the cradle of humankind. Right, and then it went on and says there was a heading preparation, no headings. Now it says here that Miss Chadwick, the biology teacher or the life sciences teacher, prepared you well for this trip. So remember, we said you have to add information. So this is the first part where you can actually use what you already have, but add more information. What else did she do to prepare you? Was there a little exercise you did in class, a funny thing that you had you do just to make you remember that you come from a long line of ancient people? So, what did she do? Add more information. What did she do to prepare you? You don't need to say that you took a bus, but of course, you could mention that that the buses were quite comfortable, or it was not very a nice trip. Perhaps something happened along the road. Perhaps something funnier happened on the road. You can don't put too much of that. Stick to the main purpose, or you may or may not want to use the school buses. It's up to you. Then the tour itself, you're not going to use the heading. You now, in this part of your report where you give information about the trip. So when you entered the tumulus and about the displays, the fossil displays, here you add the bulk of extra information. Remember I said you can double the number of words. Add the bulk of additional. Say more about what you actually saw, what was interesting. You food heading. You may or you may not want to say, that you were so hungry afterwards and how delicious the hamburgers were that you had. Blah blah. You can. It's a little bit of personal information again, but don't overdo it. So just add a personal touch, but not too much, please. Then we had a heading there, impression by the learners. How did they experience this trip? So what were they in awe of? The fossils on display, and it says there about Mrs. Pless, etc. Once again, add more about what you've learned. It's about how you found the trip. So give more information on how the learners responded to the information that they got and what they saw there. So, and be enthusiastic about it, because remember the personal touch in an informal report. It's not as though this is the formal one, it's informal. Add a bit more about how people reacted, and there will always be recommendations in a report. And in a written report, it will be numbered, so it's very structured. This is a speech that has to flow. So this will actually, the recommendations part will be part of your conclusion, where you might suggest that the trip should become an annual tradition, and not only for life science learners, and what the other learners can also, how they can benefit from it. And then something personal again, perhaps wear comfortable shoes. There are some tight spots there. So think of an effective ending. You can add one or two things there, and then test your length, because you must stay within the time limit. 3 to 5 minutes, depending on what your instruction says. If you're in grade 10, perhaps they might say 3 minutes, 11 perhaps 4, depending on what your teacher tells you. But be aware of your time limit, and you're not going to mention the date. You're not going to say that here I signed the report. No. And you're not going to mention your name here, because you mentioned it right at the beginning. Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Long, and I'm speaking to you about the trip to the cradle of humankind. And you're not going to tell them that you're the grade 10 representative of the student council. It sounds formal and unnecessary. Before you speak, make sure that you used all the information, that you used a speech format, and that you've added some information, that your register in this case is in line with the purpose. It is informal and informational, but it's your peers sitting there listening to you. If it's formal, of course, if you do the formal report instead of the informal, Use neutral and factual style, a formal register, and formal diction. And if informal, make sure that your tone and everything is informal. Always, always in any speech, a catching and appropriate introduction and ending. Always, please. When preparing, make sure that you also now make use of cue cards. In the written report, obviously you didn't have cue cards. You had your structure and your headings. Now your headings will probably be on your cue cards, isn't that so? Because that's going to remind you of where you're going with the speech. So use cue cards. Make sure it's exactly the same as in a speech because it is an oral presentation. Practice, please. Make sure that you practice in front of a mirror, if you like, or in front of a friend. Just a little other tip is please make sure that you get to your speaking location on time. Don't come running because you're late that morning and you didn't have breakfast and you overslept, or and come running and panting, and now you want to deliver the speech. Make sure that you're prepared, that you have your cue cards, that you have anything that you wish to present, like audio visual aids, and make sure that you don't drink carbonated drinks because they tell me that it dries out the mouth. So get there and be ready for your speech. When you present, you must stand relaxed. Remember, again, you're in front of peers. Gather yourself, look at your audience. If you feel a little tense, work on that tension. Focus on somebody at the end. At the end of a line or at the back of the audience, somewhere specific, and then gradually make sure that you have eye contact with your entire audience. You have to introduce yourself. I said there, you bring your name in. Please be clear and articulate about, in your presentation, because remember what the audience doesn't hear, they're not going to appreciate, right? Use all the presentation strategies that you've been taught in speech making and so forth. Speak politely. Don't become too familiar, although they are your peers. Don't become too colloquial, because that can also perhaps be a bit irritating. You should still be polite. Present your information as if it is important to you and to the audience. In other words, come across enthusiastically. You must seem as though you're really enjoying what you're doing. Make sure that you have a proper ending line and a catching ending line. Smile at the audience. Enjoy what you're doing.